and welcome to Cookie Pocket, an attempt at a podcast, episode 12, Hart's War. This film stars Colin Farrell as Tommy Hart and Bruce Willis as himself. Just kidding. Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis as Colonel McNamara. It takes place in a POW prisoner of war camp during World War II, 1945, and it is partially courtroom drama, I guess towards the end, and it's also kind of just a thriller. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a war drama / thriller / war movie, including all the troops and everything. But essentially, Tommy Hart is the attorney for a black fighting Tuskegee Airman who is imprisoned at the camp as well, and he's accused of the murder of a racist sergeant among the ranks at the POW camp, and it's up to Tommy Hart to defend him and essentially find out who done it, as courtroom dramas technically are supposed to go. But this one is very different because it has Bruce Willis and it has fighter planes in it. So, between either of you, what was your overall impression of the film?
I guess I can start. I liked this movie more than I expected to. I will admit that in terms of production, this movie is sort of like every war movie that came out at the time. This movie kind of has that early 2000s war movie look and feel. Lots of kind of deep blacks and tinted blue night scenes. If pretty much any movie that came out at the time that featured like a concentration camp or a prison or a prisoner of war camp was going to have this similar color grading and this similar look to it. So I don't think it really stands out that much in terms of production. But I do think it kind of takes on some more interesting themes than a lot of other war movies at the time did. The concept they bring up of duty versus honor and incorporating these racial issues within the camp dynamic as well. I thought that added another layer to it and made it a bit more interesting. Now, in terms of kind of the prisoner of war subgenre, this movie's kind of up against movies like The Great Escape, which, let's face it, if Hart's War is going head-to-head with The Great Escape, The Great Escape is always going to win, because that's one of the best movies of all time. But I think that, for what it is, this movie is all right, and it surpassed my expectations to a certain extent. So I gave it a 3 out of 5.
Good. Christian?
I moderately enjoyed it. I gave it a 2 out of 5, but I was wrestling with the idea of giving it a 2.5 out of 5. I enjoyed watching it. I was never extremely invested in Colin Farrell's character. I just he's definitely a good actor, and he performs to his mandate. He does pretty much everything he needs to do. But for some reason, I just kind of wasn't totally into his character, which is fine. But and not necessarily a critical downgrading, if I'm being totally objective. But I liked Terrence Howard, and I liked how the plot sort of unravels. And to me, honestly, the most interesting character was the Nazi colonel that's sort of in charge of lording over the camp. And at first that made me really uncomfortable, especially while we were watching, the idea of humanizing a character like that to any extent. Mm-hmm. But I realized that it's kind of a compliment to deepening the conflict and stressing how human relations and the individuals involved in a war are not always reflective of the regimes that they're tied to and the duties that they're basically required to perform. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was a nice human touch to it. I think my biggest critique is I just the sacrifice at the end of the movie that Colonel McNamara makes, Bruce Willis's character, did not hit me super well, especially given I couldn't get around that his initial plan was basically to sacrifice Terrence Howard's character because he was in a black man and in a situation where he didn't have the same amount of power to defend himself that an accused white man would have had.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally understand the logic that you want to save as many men as you can, especially in the context of war. That makes total sense to me. But given the racial context of McNamara's plan, it made me deeply uncomfortable. And I realized that he he overcomes that sin at the end with his sacrifice, which was great. But in my head, I feel like he sort of owed that to Lincoln, Howard's character, at the beginning. So it didn't hit me as hard as I think the movie wanted it to. But overall, it was a good film. I enjoyed it well enough, I guess. 2 out of 5.
Okay. I love this film. I think I'm just gonna say that outright. I love it for a lot of different reasons. Yeah, I've seen The Great Escape, and I absolutely agree, Zach. The Great Escape's one of the best movies of all time. And I've seen The Bridge on the River Kwai and Stalag 17.
Yep.
So those are my influences of POW movies. But in terms of this one, it definitely has a lot of the 2002 tropes to it, and I feel like the marketing for it was very, very misleading. I think it's just something you just have to go in and just kind of experience, and just don't take anything from what other people say or what how they advertise it or even what the actors say. I think it's more of like a director type of thing. But yeah, the main reasons why I really like it is that it adds a lot of nuances on top of a lot of war movie tropes of the time, and it adds very serious tones that are based off of historic events. And it doesn't over-exaggerate or under-exaggerate anything. And seeing that this movie came out, it was supposed to come out, I think, right around 9/11, and it came out right in 2002.
Yeah.
So, one of the main things a lot of people would have been worrying about is political polarization, and I see virtually none. I don't think there's any evidence of that at all. There are very clear moral messages here. And it's very honest with the way that it portrays certain military aspects, not only like just in general, like how the Army even is today, but of that time period, specifically the racial things. It actually, like Christian had mentioned, the commandant, the fact they even went to that point to humanizing him, is definitely a very risky thing to do. They have to do it very correctly. In my opinion, I feel like they had. I don't think there's any discredit to who he was or what POW commandants were like, and he was calling the Russians earlier in the movie Untermensch and things like that. So that is obviously very bad. I mean, the antagonists are very bad. But Bedford, the racist sergeant, they even give justification as to why he was racist, and not justification in his eyes, of course. But they give his perspective. They don't just make him like some dumb racist that he was like, I was a St. Louis cop. I saw these things. And it's really, I think that stuff like that is really impactful, because that he's a terrible person. That this is a very evil thing that he believes. But the fact that the movie goes as far as to justify it, or not, I shouldn't say justify, but goes far as to make it believable. Explain it. And make him a very believable character. Makes him a very scary character. And to see him die, you kind of feel happy, obviously. First, you're like, thank God that guy's dead. And then you realize the implications of him dying make the story extremely more complicated. So it's just like every negative aspect that the movie throws at you, it makes it forcibly important to the story. And the biggest thing that Christian mentioned, I'm going to mention it a little bit later, how the film had ended. How important it was of like the duty and honor, sacrifice, courage, and things like those aspects like that, and the military absolutely go over every other human aspect of you, no matter how flawed you are as a person, or how you were in the U.S. as a civilian, or what your moral perspectives are, or how you are. All of them are soldiers, and that's a very hard pill to swallow. That's probably like the hardest pill to swallow for any viewer. Especially people who aren't entirely familiar with the military. And I think that's a risk worth taking. For a lot of people, it might not be, but I gave the film a 4 out of 5. My only criticism being minor pacing issues in the beginning, and things kind of not really lining up correctly in terms of Colin Farrell, Tommy Hart's character. But yeah, 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
So on to my next topic. One of the main screenwriters, Billy Ray, didn't actually read Hart's War, the novel that the movie had some basis in, due to the fact that little of the movie had much due to the novel besides the beginning sequences and Hart's kind of not having the shoes, getting interrogated, the boxcars getting attacked by the P-51s that happened. But it took from many real-life stories in POW camps, and also was obviously inspired by The Great Escape and Stalag 17 and movies like that. Yeah. Did either of you think the first act felt out of place or awkwardly paced? Because towards the end, you kind of almost forget about it, especially because as he goes to the camp, they kind of have enough flashbacks to it to the point where it almost feels as though a lot of the first act wasn't even needed, or they dragged it out too much or tried to over-dramatize it. But what were your guys' opinions?
Well, I read that this movie originally was quite a bit longer, or had a lot more subplots, and they cut a lot out of it. One actor, Jonathan Brandis, who was in this film, apparently, like, he had this whole subplot where he was a witness in the trial, and that all got cut out to the point where he's basically not even a character in the final movie. So I do think kind of the first act in some places feel a little out of place, but to me that felt like perhaps a consequence of somebody coming in and saying, okay, this movie's too long, we gotta trim it down, and maybe cutting out scenes that would have maybe featured flashbacks to the first act, or kind of thematically referenced the first act more in order to tie those up. It felt like there was at some point a version of the movie where that first act did not feel tonally different and subtextually different to the rest of the movie, and that the bits that helped that not be the case got cut out over time. I don't know if that was the case, but throughout I felt like there's probably a director's cut of this movie that makes a lot more sense. But that might not be the case. I don't know.
Right. I was going to mention, actually, at the beginning, one of the things that kind of bothered me, it was kind of historically inaccurate, the date that they put, of course. That would only bother me and no one else. But there's the Malmedy Massacre in real life during the Battle of the Bulge, where a lot of 101st Airborne were captured and killed, obviously against the Geneva Convention. And Hart falls in the bodies, and he's like, they have this like kind of cool pan shot of him going out and, crashing the Jeep, going into the bodies and stuff. But they just showed that just for the heck of it. And, it kind of bothers me because it tonally doesn't make any sense. But go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, I get what you were saying with the opening bits. It definitely, I mean, he's kind of like, when I was asking myself questions about why this was happening is when he's just like sitting in the corner naked. I was kind of like, I have no idea where this is going. Yeah. But, I mean, I was definitely, in terms of how entertained I was, I mean, the sequence with the Jeep definitely caught my attention. So I guess it served its purpose there. And I think it's important, at least to some extent, to contextualize the torture that he went through before he encounters Colonel McNamara, or else I really think the viewer would not have any sympathy for Farrell's character, and it would really kind of eat away at the themes of his character as a moral figure defending Lincoln, and it wouldn't establish a credible conflict between him and McNamara. So I actually think a lot of the opening stuff is important in that regard.
Yeah, I feel like the opening stuff is important to set up Hart's arc. Because Hart's character, at least I saw it, is him sort of going through this arc of, at the beginning, he's tortured, and he eventually gives away the locations of these fuel dumps because he's not really willing to make, like, a sacrifice. And then at the end, he's willing to sacrifice his life to save Terrence Howard's character. But again, I've kind of felt like some of the middle of that arc, maybe another occasion where he's not willing to make a sacrifice, or where he's debating making that sacrifice. I felt like some of the middle of that arc was kind of missing, but I totally got that the first act was where we're setting that up.
Yeah, like more like an explicit turning point.
Yeah,
in his character arc. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in general, I really liked his character, and it was Hart's War, so it was kind of more about him, and a lot of those sequences, that entire bombing the boxcars and stuff like that, even though they huddled together and to make POW, things like that did kind of happen, not sequence by sequence, but incidentally. throughout the war. Things related to that kind of happened, but I mean they made that overdramatic on purpose. But him the boxcars getting blown up and all the prisoners having to travel miles and miles, that happened in the book, and the whole boot thing happened. So I mean, there's things like that. It was important in the book, but like I said, the screenwriter was like, well, we're kind of straying away, making our own story now. So the book doesn't really matter too much anymore. So going on to what were you gonna say, Zach?
I was just gonna say I had read that screenwriter who said he hadn't read the book. I think came in like late on the project. I think, and was like assigned to like make fixes and changes to make it feel more like a movie. I presume the person who started writing the screenplay had read the book, but maybe that wasn't the case either. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I didn't totally read into it, but yeah, it's interesting though.
We'll take your word for it.
Yeah, we'll definitely take Zach's word for it on that. So in terms of the casting, Terrence Howard was in Red Tails. I actually really like Red Tails for a lot of different reasons. Jointly directed by Anthony Hemingway and George Lucas, by the way.
Yeah.
Woo! He was a Tuskegee Airman in that, so that was interesting. I actually really liked him in that. He starred in various dramas. They didn't really tend to do very well. But he was an Iron Man, James Rhodes. Then no longer James Rhodes.
And then he was fired.
Don Cheadle.
In the least important James Rhodes movie for him. Like the only movie where James Rhodes doesn't wear Iron Man armor at any point.
Right.
He looks at it and he says, "I'll be back," and then he wasn't.
And then he isn't.
And then Don Cheadle's like, "Hey, okay."
Back.
So yeah, early on in Colin Farrell's acting career, he was in Minority Report, which is based on a Philip Dick novel. That was a Spielberg movie in 2003, I think. He was a Department of Justice agent or something. He was in a war drama, which I've never seen. Apparently, it failed miserably in the box office, but it was rated okay. Tigerland. He was the lead in that. And then, of course, Total Recall 2012, which is the most recent thing I can remember seeing him in, which I was okay with. An unneeded movie. I was okay with it. But
we can't forget Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them.
Oh yes, of course.
That's cinematic magnum opus.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Christian.
Sorry, I had to.
Is he good at it, Christian? Huh?
I mean, you like him more when you find out he's actually Johnny Depp. So
whoa, spoiler
I don't know.
alert. Anyway,
sorry.
In general, these two actors, only these two, okay.
Oh. Okay.
How do you think they delivered? Do you think they were convincing and interesting? Do you think they had a lot of nuance in their dialogue? I particularly liked their dialogue a lot, but what did you guys think?
Well, I went first for both of the previous two questions. So, Christian, would you like to go first on this one?
Sure. How kind of you, Zach. I accept your proposition.
Ah.
I thought the dialogue was good. I didn't really have an issue with overly dramatic speech from either character, or just really from anyone in the movie. But I liked both actors. Like I said, I think Colin Farrell performs to his mandate, but I don't think his character is super sympathetic, even given the intro stuff. I just think it's really hard to come around to the fact that he does cave into the Nazi forces, which is like it's super unfair, given days of torture. But I mean, later on you learn that he caved much sooner than others did, and I just think that's a really difficult turnaround, but I think they do it as well as they can.
Yeah.
And Terrence Howard is great. I think he's a very talented actor. I think it's kind of unfortunate that his career is where it is right now. But
gone apparently as of September of last year.
He made some like weird comments in the public eye about like religion and whatever. I don't know.
Geometry.
Geometry.
Yes.
He's talented. I hope he finds his way back, I guess.
Yeah.
I think he performs well enough, and I definitely think that's far and away the character that the audience is most emotionally invested in. So
I would say I think both actors are good in this. I think when they're on screen they perform well enough. I would say though that I connected more with Colin Farrell, I would say, as a character
Really?
with Hart. I'm a fan of I'm quite a cynical person, so I tend to be a fan of characters that might maybe make cowardly decisions or do stupid things or do selfish things, because I feel that they kind of better reflect real people. Because everybody likes to think that they would be a hero. Everybody likes to think that they would be the good guy in a bad situation. But a lot of the time, a lot of those people who think they would be heroic when faced with a dangerous situation where they're in danger make selfish, stupid decisions that get other people hurt. So I kind of do like how Hart makes the decision to sort of cave to the Nazi pressure, and he reveals the location of the fuel dumps, and then I like his arc, how he kind of builds throughout the film of being this sort of disgrace of an officer to sort of redeeming himself within this court context and being willing to make that sacrifice for Terrence Howard's character. Terrence Howard, I think, is an okay actor. I've never been wowed by him in anything, but I think he's good in everything that I have seen him in. But again, this is a character, his character in this, I feel like I would probably have connected to him more if there was more of him in the movie. As it is, what we see of his character in the film, I feel like he's sort of there to tell stories that'll inspire people, and he's there to say things that remind us that racism is bad, and that people like him are just as equal to all the other soldiers, which is true. But I feel like since most of the times that he's on screen, he's basically just spouting those lines, I didn't connect with him as much as an actual character. I'm sure there were scenes or shots where he's just having casual conversations, or just talking further with Colin Farrell about the case that they're working on. I'm sure there are scenes like that got left on the cutting room floor, and I wish I could have seen a little bit more of those to just see what this guy's like when he's not laying out like a story about his son, or a metaphorical story we're meant to connect to the plot. So Colin Farrell, I'd say I connect with more, but both actors are good.
Yeah, I also connected with Colin Farrell more for pretty much the exact reasons that Zach had mentioned. And I also would have seen Terrence Howard a lot more, and see him more as like a developed kind of, he could have had his own flaws as well. Obviously, it's very difficult to push that message. And what I would say on that is, with a lot of the racial tension and pressure from virtually everybody, not only was it a raw racism from Sergeant Bedford, but also it was kind of like contrived, like very deep, like very thought out. Kind of everybody has to, at least, even if they aren't racist, they have to at least pretend that they hate black people just to get this mission to go forward. Essentially. And he has to face through all of that, and he has to experience it. He's experiencing it as if it's an actual thing. And he truly believes, because this is what he's been living his whole life, that he's constantly been treated unequally, and systematically treated unequally. And, him suffering through that so much, and just going through the war and finally going to a POW camp, and now he's still suffering with it. Even though he's thousands of miles away from home, he's still experiencing the exact same thing, even as a soldier in uniform. So that is my justification for his character. And I do agree, Zach, a lot of what he says is very blatant and obviously very true things. Like this, he's pushing a message that virtually everybody agrees with, or at least everybody should agree with. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of substance behind that racist aspect of it, and I think him existing brings a lot of that theme. He's definitely the driving force behind that theme for obvious reasons. But yeah, I really liked Colin Farrell as well, and he was very. I don't think he was like super compelling, or there weren't too many moments where he was like but like he was like, yeah, oh, that was good. Like he did. That was really interesting moments, especially in the courtroom and things like that. He recites his lines very well, very effectively, and he has to be an actor portraying a character, but also has to be an attorney fighting for the side of an actor who is portraying a character. So I think that's definitely something that he has to overcome, and I think he does that very well. But yeah, I mean, in terms of character development, he's not terribly interesting when it comes to other characters I've seen in other war movies. Believe it or not, even older ones. But I think he really delivers as much as he can. He does the best he can, as Christian had mentioned. There's not. I think he was well cast, and I don't think there's too much more you could have asked from him. So my sub question, I have two of them. You're gonna know what the other one is when I tell you the first one.
Okay.
I was gonna ask you, what about Marshall Yurish, Obert's Visser? He was the camp commandant, and Cole Hauser is Vic Bedford. Do you think they were a convincing antagonist?
Yeah, I weird little thing when watching the movie. Cole Hauser is, I believe, the son of an actor named Wings Hauser. And Wings Hauser in like the 80s weirdly often got cast as like these racist officers and racist officials. There's in A Soldier Story, which is another like soldier encampment movie, he plays this racist officer. And when watching this movie, I thought, before I even knew that Cole Hauser and Wings Hauser were related, I thought, you know what? If this movie was made in the 80s, this role would be played by Wings Hauser, and lo and behold, he's his son. And
That's
I
crazy.
think he plays. I think he plays that Wings Hauser racist role just fine. He takes after his old man. He's got that kind of. He's got that kind of sleazy edge to him, and he really does have. I mean, poor Cole Hauser. He really does have the look for this kind of character.
Oh no.
He's got kind of that like slim face and the stubble, and kind of like weaselly eyes that dart around. He really does fit this sort of character of the guy that when you walk into the room, you know he's going to cause trouble. And I think he plays that really well. I'm sure he's not like that in real life. I'm sure Cole Hauser is a wonderful man, but he plays that character really well in this film. He's the guy that you immediately hate, like as soon as he stands up and speaks in the film. And our Nazi commandant, I cannot remember the name of the actor, even though you just said it, Mitchell.
Marshall Yurish.
Okay, Marshall Yurish. I think he plays his role well as well. The sort of honorable Nazi who's in charge of the POW camp is a role that I think is a character that exists in pretty much every story about a prisoner of war camp. All of these movies you kind of go into, okay, who's the guy in charge? Why is he in charge? Does he really believe in this? And most of them come out with a character sort of like this. A guy that is in charge and has this deep sense of like honor and duty, and maybe doesn't 100% agree with like the people in charge, but he's doing what he's doing because it's what the country's doing. And I think he plays that well enough. One of my favorite bits of the movie was the conversation he has with Bruce Willis' character about, let's go out into the yard and have an officer's duel. And he sort of just dismisses him and talks him out of it, and discusses how, you know, people like them have more distinguished ways of dealing with their issues. And I thought that was a great little exchange that really sheds light on his thought process.
Christian?
I agree. I think that they're both engaging in opposite ways. Ironically, I end up hating Bedford a lot more. It's funny because but every way that I can compliment his performance is a reason that I absolutely despised his character.
Yeah.
So it's a very weird double-edged sword to talk about it like this. But he made me really hate his character. So good on him, I guess.
Yeah.
And the other guy who I also forgot his name.
The commandant?
Yeah.
The commandant, yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Commandant.
I thought he was the most interesting character in the movie. Every time he had something to say, I was invested and I wanted to hear it. So I think like every single one of his lines has a purpose, whether that's directly to serve the plot or to further the arc of Farrell's character, and it's just very interesting how he proverbially works the room between McNamara and allowing the trial to proceed as like this sick mode of entertainment for him. It's very interesting, and I've never really considered the idea of a Nazi being an interesting character, and at first it did make me uncomfortable, but I think that it definitely added to the movie as a whole.
Mm-hmm. And it's even worse when the Commandant actually has a point, when he actually has something that's credible. He has credible evidence. He's criticizing McNamara for trying to be this American war hero that we're the Americans, we're fighting, Nazi Germany, we're anti-racists and stuff like that. And he's like, are you really anti-racist? Are you really, is your country perfectly fine? Are you guys not having your own racial issues? And that's such that concept is, first of all, not touched on very much in cinema, I don't think. No. And and second, it's very troubling. Like, it makes you really, really like feel you don't really know what to believe anymore. You're very confused with yourself and very troubled as to how something like that could happen. And it especially is among a lot of these movies like We Were Soldiers and like shows like Band of Brothers, where it really looks like the American military is very pure. And they take this very historically accurate, accounts and compile them and kind of portray it on the screen in this manner through these characters. And I think that is a very, very unique thing about this film. And that's one of the reasons why you can appeal to the Commandant as a terrible person, as the antagonist, and also as a graduate from Yale. Like they just keep pushing it. Like he and you get the sense when he's drunk and everything, and he's like, I lost my son in World War One, just like the French and the British lost their sons and stuff like that. Like he's really pushing to be. What he's doing is working, and that's the worst thing to see. It's not just like an evil person's finally doing something. Like, I hate to make this comparison, but Thanos, okay? It's not like he's actually accomplishing something. You're like, wow, I'm so troubled he actually did what he's saying he's going to do. But, I mean, he's an explained character, like I had said with Bedford. That is my final conclusion with Bedford, by the way. Explained character. And Bedford as a very, very convincing racist. And he's, I full on believe. I'm so sorry, Cole Hauser. Okay, but it's very hard for me not to believe you're racist after seeing that performance, and that's a compliment to his performance. Like Zach said, I'm sure he's a great guy. But anyway, like I had said earlier, how they explained it and how he's such a very convincing, realistic character, and that to me is very important, especially in a story like this, and when facts are being considered and things like that. So yeah, I definitely thought they were very compelling, and I think there's very little that they could have done, they could have changed, but with obvious, controversial side effects. And my final sub-question, how was Bruce Willis as Colonel McNamara?
Would you like to start, Christian?
Sure. I'll start. I mean, it seems like he cares enough to try. In terms of acting, it seemed like that to me, at least. Yeah. I'll give him that much, but I really can't come around to feeling sympathetic about his sacrifice. I just can't. I really, really just can't, because it still ultimately comes from a place of this black man is of a lower stature than everybody else. So we are going to use him as a sacrifice. And even though that is in some ways valiant because he's trying to save as many men as he can, he's still using Terrence Howard's blackness to save himself and other white men. And that premise is, I just cannot get past that premise regardless. But it's good that he ends up sacrificing himself instead of Lincoln. And I think his performance was decent, but I was just really frustrated with the character throughout, given that premise. And McNamara, it's pretty quickly realized that his whole proceeding over the trial is a sham, and I didn't find him even remotely sympathetic until he comes back and sacrifices himself. And to me, there needs to be something more there. But given an extremely uncomfortable premise that is entirely reliant on a disparity in stature because of Lincoln's skin color, and the fact that I didn't think there was enough build up to feeling sympathetic about his character. That is probably like the main reason I gave this a 2 out of 5 instead of a 2.5 or a 3.
Mm-hmm. I would say Bruce Willis at this point is kind of notorious as an actor who's stopped caring. Nowadays, he has these rules where if he's going to be in your movie, he has to have all his scenes done in a day, and then he has a body double he usually works with that does everything else. So at this point, Bruce Willis is kind of just exclusively in like low budget trash, and then his body double's back is in the rest of the movie. I feel like this is before he totally stopped caring. He clearly cared enough to be on set. I'm sure they didn't do all his scenes in a day on this. I'm sure he was on set for a little longer than a day. They filmed this, I think, in like Prague or something like that. So he went overseas to film the movie. That's a modicum of caring. I don't necessarily know if he cared enough to give much of a performance, though. Mitchell, when you reviewed this film earlier than when we discussed it, and I asked you, does Bruce Willis care in this film? You told me something along the lines of, I don't know if his character really requires him to care that much. And I would kind of agree with you. This is a character that regretfully I think Bruce Willis doesn't necessarily need to care that much about his performance to play, because most of this film he's kind of just resolute and walled off, and I'm going to say these things because I'm a tired general and I want to get the day done. And that could either be a performance because he's just kind of totally out of it and he's like burnt out by the war and he's just tired,
or he's burnt out by his acting
Bruce Willis is just tired.
Yeah, yes. Right. Yeah.
So I think it sort of works, but I feel like Bruce Willis is a good actor. He's a funny guy. He's able to get like a real dramatic performance and real emotions out of an audience, and I think it's kind of sad that he might be the least impressive aspect of this movie. I think all the other actors are working circles around him, and he's kind of just standing in the middle with a non-committal shrug. So I think he's fine. He's not actively bad, but I think he's a total flatline for most of the movie.
Yeah, and I would have to agree. I wasn't totally expecting a lot from him, I guess. I mean, besides obviously like The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable and things like that. He's pretty much everything's just Die Hard, pretty much. Yes. So they actually tried to advertise this as Die Hard somehow. I don't know how, but they tried to market it that way. Maybe it was just to convince people to make them think differently, which I guess is fair, but that's just not being honest. So that's not what marketing is for. That's deception. But I like I had said, this is a character that does not have to try very hard, and every time he's supposed to do something, he does it to the extent of which he is expected to do it. I think the one time where I saw his expression change significantly was when the fighter plane was crashing, and he kind of has a surprised face. I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen Bruce Willis surprised like that in a very long time, if ever. He was like, his mouth was like open, like gaping for like a split second. I was like, wow, this is like, where was this whole time?
His jaw actually works.
Yeah, his jaw works. Yes,
and he can move his face.
He doesn't just whisper like this, like he has a tricky problem. But yeah, no, I like that. Every time he has to express emotion, he does it fine. But it doesn't like totally hit off. And Colin Farrell's like, every time he interacts with him. So, which is a part of his character. But like I said, it can be very distracting, kind of take you out of the moment, make you realize it's Bruce Willis. Everybody knows it's Bruce Willis. So, exactly what Zach said. I think he was a flat line. He didn't really add too much. He didn't really take away too much. And that adds credibility to Christian's point, to the fact of not caring too much about the end, not really feeling sympathy for him towards the end. But I was going to ask, what was the most surprising thing you actually found out about the ending? Was anything remarkably obvious, like you knew the whole time? Or was anything like absolutely a twist, like you were not expecting it at all?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say the ending astonished me. The ending didn't make me go, oh my god! But, like, I suppose I didn't necessarily expect the ending. I did not necessarily expect Bruce Willis to be the one who died. If anything, I kind of expected Colin Farrell, Hart, to be the one that died, because I thought it would fulfill his arc, and it would kind of bring things full circle. I mean, I suppose it makes sense for Bruce Willis' character to die narratively, but it didn't really astonish me. It was kind of mainly because I think of Bruce Willis's performance and my lack of investment in his character. It was kind of the thing that happened, and then the movie was over.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. What surprised me was that the commandant was going to kill everybody involved in the trial.
Yeah.
And then Bruce Willis shows up and he's like, okay, I'll kill just you, and I'll let everybody else off the hook because you came back. Like, that surprised me, and I think like the only reason I found that believable is because that, to me, that character has like a very diverse and complex way of understanding humans, and the way that he's kind of mathematically justifies the operations in the camp, and he's got like a very systematic, yet also it's totally up to him. It's very arbitrary, but it's also systematic, and it feels measured even though it's not really. So there's a lot of wiggling room there in his character and the way that he's established to make that make some sense, but it still hit me as a surprise. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's a positive for the ending, but I also agree with everything Zach said about Bruce Willis.
Yeah, and I do think the way that he's supposed to exist is he's not necessarily supposed to be a absolute believable, everybody's supposed to like him leader. Everybody is flawed, and he's probably one of the most flawed people in the movie.
For sure.
Besides the antagonist, obviously. But, and it really plays very hard into the Army kind of way of looking at things. And I'm trying not to be biased, but McNamara's in the 1st Army Infantry, for example. He's in the 1st Infantry Division, and their motto is no mission too difficult, no sacrifice too great, duty first. That's their motto. Mm-hmm. And just that as an example. I mean, things like that. He was a West Point grad. His entire family was West Point. So he looks at everything as if the war is still going on, and he still has to continue these missions and things like that, no matter what. No matter what the situation is. And like I said, various situations in the movie are controversial, and I personally think that they make total sense to me as somebody who very much enjoys military things and looks at things from a military perspective when watching war movies. Not as I wouldn't say not as the average person. This is harder to relate to as an average person. I don't think it's impossible, but it's harder. And I understood the reason why he did what he did and why he had to do it. If you're going to have I would say even Lincoln Scott knew that, because when Lincoln Scott found out, he wasn't like, oh man, this is a sham. He was for like 2 seconds, and then he kind of came to the realization, like, now I know what honor means. And things like that. And even he himself as a soldier, after experiencing all of that, knew that he was fighting for his country, and that he as a soldier had to do his duty no matter what. And that sounds bad, especially that sounds bad to some people, especially in the contemporary context. Because racism is absolutely bad, has to be gotten rid of no matter what. But in the military, things are looked at completely differently, that sacrifices have to be made, decisions have to be made based on weighing the options and trying to save this one. Like, Christian understands this, of course. He said it himself. But having one black person, 35 white people, in that case, it's not that. It's 35 soldiers versus 1 soldier.
Right.
And that's the way that they looked at it. And Christian, I understand your perspective, and I'd say that's a perfectly fair point to make, and that's entirely valid. But that is the reason why I really like this movie, one of the reasons why, and I think it justifiably makes sense in the context. But it's a very it no holds barred. It goes all the way. Like, it tries to explain this to you, and if you don't get it, then it's not necessarily your fault. But if you understand what the director is going for, then that's how it is. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say. Any other thoughts? Or I guess we can just go to the rundown now if you guys want to, unless you have any other burning questions or comments.
2 out of 5. It was decent. Yeah. Thanks, Mitchell.
No, thank
you for making us talk about uncomfortable things in a good setting where objective conversation rules. I think it's very good that we discuss these things.
Yes.
Yeah. I was gonna say I feel like this movie is characterized by 4 out of 5 style subjects and concepts executed in a 2 out of 5 way. I feel like in terms of production and screenwriting, a lot of that is sort of 2 out of 5 level, but I think it's the concepts and the ideas here that are pretty heady stuff and elevates it to a 3 out of 5 for me.
Okay. Interesting critical analysis. 4 out of 5, gang. 4 out of 5, gang. It's a great war movie. If I will say, if you are interested in a POW movie, if you have seen POW movies, I think this is one that you have to see. If you liked Great Escape enough, and you like Stalag 17, older movies like that, this takes from those a lot. If you like World War II war movies in general, this is pretty good. Not a lot of action. It's very much drama. If you liked A Few Good Men, this is kind of similar to that. The courtroom aspects of it. It's not absolutely crucial to the movie necessarily. If you like Bruce Willis, Zach described it perfectly, flatline. But he's in it, and if you like Bruce Willis and everything, then you might like him in this.
Maybe.
Colin Farrell, I think this is one of his best performances. If you like Terrence Howard and Red Tails, I think he does a better job in this, and the issues that are portrayed in this are universally understood, very easy to comprehend, but are very controversial. So if you tend to be offended by things like that, especially, prominent racial issues, because this goes all the way, the Redford uses racial slurs and things like that. So if that bothers you, of course, I would not recommend seeing this movie. But if you're interested in things like that, if you want to see a relatively good historical representation of certain aspects of POW camps and what honor and duty means and leadership in the army and things like that, it's a good watch. So onward to the rundown.
Right. 60 seconds. Different things pertaining to the movie we just discussed will be verbally accosted at Zach, and Zach will respond with a rating out of 5. Okay. Mitchell, are you ready?
Do I start?
Yes.
Epic. Okay, I'm ready.
3, 2, 1, go.
Bible to say I'm sorry.
2 out of 5.
Red Tails.
2 out of 5.
Sacrificing oneself to prevent one sacrificing themselves to the sacrifice of someone.
3 out of 5.
Jazz.
3 out of 5.
Oddly timed CGI planes.
3 out of 5.
Bruce Willis caring.
2 out of 5.
Shoe factories.
3 out of 5.
Lasting 3 days versus lasting for a month.
3 out of 5.
Terrence Howard as Lincoln Scott.
3 out of 5.
Old-fashioned duels.
3 out of 5.
Saluting.
2 out of 5.
Everything being a sham.
3 out of 5.
Graduating from Yale as the class's hardest worker.
3 out of 5.
Bread football.
2 out of 5.
Explosive propaganda.
2 out of 5.
Explicitly evil and realistic antagonists.
3 out of 5.
Colin Farrell as Tommy Hart.
3 out of 5.
3 seconds. Hogan's Heroes.
3 out of 5. No, 4 out of 5.
Best.
Alrighty.
Hogan's Heroes is A+ entertainment.
It
By
really
which
is.
I mean B- entertainment.
Hey.
But still really funny. Maybe
Yes.
kind of in bad taste, but really funny.
Yes. Okay. I'm ready for the movie. Christian.
Oh, yes.
Oh, right. I'm next. Ooh.
You are next.
I'm going to be dragging Zach by his feet to the happiest place on earth in our next episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we will be discussing WALL-E.
Yay.
The Pixar classic. It's truly one of my favorite films of all time. Yes, I think it is beautiful and emotional and everything that anyone will ever need in a movie. So, for those that can't see Zach at the moment, he is smirking and, he's going to put up with it and it's going to be okay. So,
Yes.
Catch us next time for that.
Yes. Okay, this has been Cookie Pocket An Attempt at a Podcast, episode 12, Hart's War. Thank you, and you're welcome, and I'll see you later.
Goodbye.
Bye.